Welcome back. Today I wanted to talk about Perfumer Byblis and why she may be a bit more useful than people think, and despite her technically being situated right now as more of a turn 2 player, or at least that's what's being said about her, I don't think that's actually the case, and I think she's actually a bit more versatile and quite nice, and I'll give you examples of why later in today's video. With that though, let's break down everything you need to know about her, starting with her skills. Now, the thing about Perfumer Byblis is that she actually has quite a bit of utility and may feel somewhat similar to a character like Deathly Ray if you have or have now played that character, though admittedly it's been a while since Deathly Ray has been super strong. With this, we have her first ability, which is Aura de la Mort. This gives an effectiveness buff to her first, which is really nice. And on top of this, this also applies Redirected Provoke on all enemies for 1 turn with a 100% chance to inflict 2 venom effects for 2 turns. Now, notably about this is lacking a strip, which is kind of annoying in certain cases, but depending on who you're using or what sort of gameplay or what sort of playstyle that you're adhering to, this might not be the biggest deal. However, I do want to mention that it does have basically at the very end here, at the end of the turn, it detonates venom effects inflicted on the target. Now, yes, this is pretty important, number one, because again, you have 2 venom effects that last for 2 turns that are being detonated. And again, this does actually kind of, I would say, pressure most high HP targets, and though you may be wondering if this is, again, an exclusive to turn 2 sort of playstyle or a character, there are a lot of players, especially right now, who are taking high HP characters such as the Boss Runka or even the Nodos and playing more aggressive or quick, because otherwise, well, sometimes you get anti-cleaved or sometimes you have to deal with some nonsense, and some of these high health characters is how you prevent yourself from dying to this. That said, we also have Elixir de... No, I'm not even going to try. But, okay, point is, with this reads that at the start of an enemy's turn, you grant Lingering Fragrance to all allies for 1 turn, and when an ally's health is 50% or less after being activated or after being attacked, it activates Lavier and Rose. Now, a couple things are super big about this. First and foremost, this Lingering Fragrance increases max HP of certain targets. It has definitely saved a few scenarios where it felt like my Freeman was going to die to additional damage, which is fine. It is what it is. It's not going to entirely save her. It's not like because you have this 5% max HP, she survives entirely, but rather I want to focus on the other part of this passive, which is that when you're attacked with this, you reflect 8% of the damage suffered back to the attacker. On top of this, it does also read that reflected damage cannot be higher than the bearer's max HP, which of course is not supposed to be that everyone gets Yulha's passive effectively turn 1, which is pretty balanced, but it does stack and is pretty impactful. Now, just straight off the gate, reflecting this is really nice, especially if you're using someone like Perfumer Byblis, apologies, against a high damage, high AoE team, because again, on the other side of the coin, if Freerun is hitting into someone like Byblis, you do actually start to take a lot of damage, and you will inevitably, kind of pen through the shield, and you just take raw damage that you will die to. It doesn't take quite often, or rather quite a lot of turns for that to happen either. It's not like the stacking has to be after Frenzy 9 in order for it to happen. After a couple turns of someone like Freerun hitting AoE like this, she just dies. On that note, Lavier and Rose reads that if you, again, are below 50% health and you get attacked, or one of your allies does, it dispels 2 buffs from all allies and recovers HP before recovering a barrier for 2 turns. Now, this is obviously why players are going to use this character alongside, I guess, like some of the more tanky characters if you're trying to prevent someone from playing more aggressive or being faster. But the reality here is that even by itself, just having this, even as an offensive character, is really nice, or in an offensive team is really nice, mostly because if something decides to counter you, or if you have to eat 1 AoE, for instance, certain characters being able to survive, or you being able to, say, for instance, heal up your Spirit Eye Celine because she's taken half health, but she can obviously, she's taken too much damage and she's able to heal before she ends up dying. This is actually pretty impactful. Again, I think that this barrier and heal is super helpful for almost like any playstyle or any sort of team that you can mix up or make with her. But I do want to also highlight the skill 1 here, which again is nothing to scoff at. Now, again, this does require 10 soul burn in order to activate, but it's a dual attack from the ally with the highest attack, which again, if you're again using someone like Perfumer Byblis with more aggressive, fast turn taking characters, or even if you're using them with whoever your highest attack knight is or something, this is pretty impactful. I'm sure you guys have seen just how nice or how strong something like Barunka's Soulburn S1 can be. This is kind of in the same direction, and me personally, I'm a big fan of Perfumer Byblis for this. And again, as we'll get into in a moment, this character has lots of uses that I think people aren't necessarily looking into quite yet. I'd actually like to take a moment though to talk about her build. Now, I've seen a couple different builds for Perfumer Byblis already. I've seen people on Prot, I've seen people on mix sets, I've seen people on HP, counter, basically anything. This, again, I think does feel a bit similar to what you'd imagine from someone like Death Dealer Ray. If you're someone that's trying to play more aggressive or fast with Byblis, excuse me, obviously having her fast is pretty nice. I may personally even want this Byblis to be faster, as I've often found myself pairing someone like Byblis with a Veronica if I'm fighting against an MLDN, or I may want to, you know, try to take an extra turn, and if she's not fast enough, it feels like I may not be able to bridge in certain cases, or I just have to play much different alongside that. That said, with the build that I have here, I've obviously got a lot of effectiveness. I don't have much effect resistance, which, again, to be honest, is something that I've definitely struggled with a little bit, but I'd actually like to point out that her artifact is super impactful for her especially. Now, I will say, especially with the introduction of characters like ML Yulha, the ability to dispel one debuff and prevent yourself from getting turbo chain locked into debuffs all the time is already very strong, and I like that a lot. However, Perfumer Byblis being able to not only cleanse with her S2 if you like get a little bit low, but you also being able to every 3 enemy turns cleanse one debuff while also cutting is a super insane artifact. Like this, or a super insane effect for an artifact. Now with this, I think I've definitely also seen other people take a number of other artifacts in this place. I mean, I've seen a few people take Bird's Eye View, if you're trying to be a bit more aggressive. I've seen other players, again, I don't know, basically use like stat artifacts, or I've seen ones that are just, again, trying to use Guardian Ice Crystal because it's a healing artifact. I've also seen Doctor's Bag, which is, I don't know how I feel necessarily about some of the other options. I think, for me personally, I think Veritas is super insane for an artifact, especially with the way that Perfumer Byblis is already performing. And again, I think with just the combat readiness alone, if you're able to cut ahead of something and you're able to redirect, provoke, and venom them, or prevent, again, or cut ahead of someone like a Nodos, and you can reduce the amount of health that he has to begin with, it does start to add up. Now, I'll talk about RTA a bit more in a moment, but I'd actually like to take a moment to talk about the teams that I've seen someone like Perfumer Byblis already with. Now, you could probably tell I've been playing a bit of RTA. I played a pretty high amount actually in preseason, but coming into World Arena for 2020, or rather, this is the day of, I guess, like summer 2026 arena, I've seen a lot of different Perfumer Byblises being played. I myself have also been playing her. I've been playing a bit with Briarwitch Iceria, and as you can see, there are a number of games, I would say, where she's included or not included. Most notably, I think, again, she is definitely used alongside some of these like turn 2 teams, which is, again, I understand probably some of the stronger locations where you can find her, but me personally, I've also found that if you try to end up using someone like the Byblis alongside some of these higher health, or against some of these teams that look to Uno reverse or kind of reverse cleave you when you take too much damage, she does actually save you quite a bit of health. And again, this isn't super unnoticeable either. Again, across the different teams that you'll see, there are going to be people that are playing fast. They're not exclusively trying to play slow and use the Perfumer Byblis. She does have a lot of use, kind of, again, just being this wall or being this like reset, kind of similar to what you'd expect from someone like a Scales who can heal, you know, after taking a bit of debuffs or after the enemy team has taken all their combat readiness push, or even something a bit similar to like a healing that you'd find from a Ruel, though again, it's a bit different and it's more of a cleanse, so you may maybe relate it a bit more to something like, I don't know, maybe like a Designer Lilibit reset or a full cleanse or Mediator Cowrick, if that's a bit more similar. But for me personally, and from my experience with the Byblis, it feels like she is definitely more suited for controlling and being more of that middle ground where you can use her kind of similar to Death Dealer Ray, which is why personally I think she's incredibly strong at the moment. Now, obviously, the next thing you'd probably want to talk about is Arena, and admittedly, I feel like Arena is a bit of a weird place right now because everyone just clicks the little magnifying glass and you can see exactly what team works or doesn't work. But personally, again, especially if you're running a high effectiveness Perfumer Byblis, excuse me, I don't really see many teams that could really counter what Byblis is doing. Of course, you do need a stripper, and there are obviously going to be tons of immunity, and even if you scroll through teams, I'm sure you can find tons and tons of teams that will have like 4 or 5 immunity, and of course you're always at the mercy of someone like a New Moon Luna to seal your whole team, so things can be a little bit weird, especially if they're trying to reverse cleave you in Arena. But personally, I don't think there's that much that will stop a high effectiveness Perfumer Byblis at the moment, especially if you're able to have someone like the New Moon Luna go before her, and especially if you're avoiding something like a Secret Art Storm or a gacha sort of cleanser in the game, unless of course you fight the Perfumer Byblis yourself on the defense. But I don't think she's necessarily going to be that incredible for defense at the moment, though my assessment of Arena right now is not super insane. And as I said that, there is someone here that's at 12,000 that does have Byblis on here. Whether or not this is actually the best use for her, though, is up to debate. Again, not like every single character or every single person here has Byblis, but I do think it's worth mentioning that, again, she is a gacha sort of versatile sort of character. So if you are going to kind of switch up the build on her, maybe you run her super slow, maybe you run her on counter, or maybe you run her super fast and she activates off of an artifact and she's able to redirect provoke your whole team. That could be an angle too. Who knows? This one's paired with Harsetti, but we'll have to really see, especially for something like Arena, how things pan out, as again, it is a complete minefield over there. And again, whether this is just some trickery or whether this is the standard Byblis build is completely up for debate. Now, I do also want to point out that for Arena, or rather, I should say for PvE sort of things, she does, of course, have Redirect Provoke, which I don't think is super popular at the moment. Whether or not this is going to be something that you use in something like Hall of Trials when it comes back, or whether you end up using this for something like a Golem or a grass-based hunt or an Advent, I'm sure there's probably an angle here for Byblis. Personally, I haven't done the Advent at the moment. There's honestly, with this rotating cycle, all I've been pretty much doing is just doing Otherworldly Breach and just playing RTA basically every single moment, especially with the new events. But in terms of what you can actually use with her, I would imagine that if you do need some sort of, if there is some sort of requirement for debuffing, it is a 100% guaranteed, or rather, I should say, a 100% chance for a Redirect Provoke and a Venom, and it is 3 debuffs in 1 turn, so if that ends up being something that you need for the Advent, that's fine, but again, full transparency, not really something that I've looked into, and also, this isn't even a 100% chance to Death Break, if this is something that you're looking to put in the background for Advent as an auto. But even despite this, I do actually want to kind of fixate a bit on the build that I have here right now. I do think that I have probably one of the more, at least for the playstyle that I have right now, one of the more well-tuned Byblises at the moment. In terms of my builds, some of these are a bit nicer in terms of gear score, nothing crazy. Again, it's quite rare, at least in my opinion, to have high speed and high effectiveness on every single piece. I think that's like one of the most like rare things that I've been trying to farm for as of late. But as you're seeing here, I've got quite a bit of HP, I've got quite a bit of speed, and I've got quite a bit of effectiveness. Even with 200, I will say it does feel like I've hit even some of the higher ER targets. Now, I haven't tried hitting something, like an ML Aria, and I haven't fought like a Christie with Perfumer Byblis at the moment, but pretty much nothing I've encountered at this time has been able to resist a 250F Perfumer Byblis, and whether that's just because it's early and I've only played, I don't know, like 25 games, but I mean, it just reset. Whether that's the case or whether that's the reason for it, I can't really say. I, however, have been pretty happy with the bulk, the speed, and the effectiveness of the build. I know there's probably a few people that may want to slot, especially if you're playing slower, into a bit more effect resistance. And again, if you're playing slow, it's quite rare for there to be like 300 ER characters anyways. But the build that I have here is obviously in case if someone throws out like a random Destina or a random ER character or a Nodos that for some random reason has Bastion of whichever, what is it? You know what I mean? The ER Bastion. if that's the one, or if that's the build that I come across and I need to deal with high ER targets, that's what this Perfumer Byblis is for. I could very easily, however, see someone changing the build of this, and I don't know, maybe using something like an HP ring and having something similar to this, like a 1 or a 19,000 HP, and you can kind of survive a bit longer. But admittedly, it doesn't even really feel like Byblis dies quite that much with my build. Pretty much if I played her, or if I've drafted well enough, the whole team, again, just like a Death Dealer Ray, is entirely slept, and they start taking like infinite amounts of like, toxic or poison, and they get corroded, they lose their HP, it's injury, and then they explode. And that to me seems pretty fine. The only other exception to this, I would say, is there are some end games where it feels like I may need a bit more speed, or some early parts where I need a bit more speed. But admittedly, I don't even know how relevant this is, because again, if I just had this artifact max and I had the guaranteed chance to dispel debuff, if I had the increased CR, I don't even know if my speed necessarily matters as much, because either I'm going to take the turn with someone like Briar, or if I have a pusher like Scales to push up, it doesn't even feel like her speed matters that much. And then, as the enemy team is sleeping, some of these extra turns don't really matter as much. But overall, again, I don't think I would change too much about her. I think it's nice that she gives HP to herself, and also being able to spread HP is also quite nice. But of course, I'm not really necessarily willing at the moment to either pull for dupes or to give up my other Byblis for her. But I should also go into the pros and cons for her, because I think that's probably the most important part about her and my review of her. Now, you've probably seen it from the World Arena matches, and if this is something that you're just curious about, that's fine. But I think one of the obvious pros for this character is that a lot of the characters that you'll especially see on the right side here, they are sometimes going to have immunity, and if you aren't, or if you're just trying to use Byblis raw and you don't have a stripper, yeah, you'll probably deal with a few scenarios where she doesn't feel quite that good, because you may fight against 4 immunity. But again, where I think she is quite strong is if you use her similar to where you'd use a Death Dealer Ray, not necessarily for just the strip, but for the ability to debilitate or to stun the enemy, or to control them. If you're in that sort of situation, and especially if you're trying to control someone like Nodos, I think she does incredibly well. And again, I think having Redirect Provoke, being able to also capsize the amount of health that health-based targets have, is obviously really nice, because not only are you killing them, you're also reducing their effectiveness with obviously injury. Now, that said, I do also think that she's one of the best closers at the moment in terms of being able to defense break and then kill something. That's happened like 1,000 times. I think in this game specifically, I apologize, I was playing this on my phone, but if I could replay this, literally the whole team went to sleep with the Byblis here, and even though you're seeing no damage, like this is literally a no damage team, by the way, just the Byblis defense break into Soulburn S1 with like the Briar was enough to either kill everything, or they had low enough health and they were just taking a billion damage from like the pop damage or the additional damage from Briar at the end, and the target and the redirect provoke. I wish I could show you a screenshot actually of how many debuffs was on this team, but it was like 60 debuffs. And again, I don't even think this guy necessarily drafted entirely, like it's not like he just picked 5 like mighty scouts or anything and tried to, he had a plan going in. He was obviously a bit more evasion based, which is what a lot of players do right now, especially against Nodos. But I genuinely also don't really know what you would do against something like this, because it's effectively what people had to deal with the annoyance of old Witch of the Mirror Tenebria when she was very, very incredibly strong and felt like there was no counter. Only the issue now is that there's like multiple of these characters on the same team, and now all of them basically crowd control your team, and it doesn't feel like you could do anything. Obviously, joking aside, I'm sure that there's a lot of like anti-cleansing, or there's like cleansing things that you could do. It's just, it starts to feel a bit goofy and a bit funny when the characters that are supposed to prevent you from getting debuffed, also have some sort of counter mechanic built into, or like the characters that are supposed to be countered have a counter mechanic. So like if you wanted, so let's say you picked Laya into this, you just get, you lose half your health and all of a sudden Laya doesn't do anything. Like all of a sudden, you have rupture damage and like you're getting outpaced and everyone's super fast and everyone's feared. And you get my point. In any case, I do obviously also want to point out that characters like Byblis do also come with I would say a bit of gear requirement associated with them. And I think that's probably where the biggest pros and cons, or rather the biggest cons for someone like Byblis comes from, because otherwise, again, you could play her entirely turn 2. And this honestly was a pretty close match. I probably could have picked someone like Lionheart's Army here, but that's besides the point. If you're going to play her quite fast, you do need pretty good gear, but you don't necessarily just need pretty good gear on the Byblis. If you're going to really play a fast playstyle, like with, you know, characters like the Renak or the Arunkas, or rather the Briarwitch series of the world, you do need quite a number of speed characters. I'm not claiming to say this is relatable at all. I'm even to this day, I think this is quite surprising at how much speed I have as someone that really hasn't like giga farmed. And I know there's already that rank 1 guy who has like 5 320 characters. Not even going into that point. But I do think that if you're going to play Renak, or rather, I should say, if you're going to play Perfumer Byblis the way that a lot of people are playing her in like that speedy sort of build, or for that speed build specifically, I do think you should bear in mind that as a bit of a con, but kind of like a medium point, you do need other fast characters, because there's no point in being a 260 Perfumer Byblis if you have to give up all of your gear and your fastest character is someone like Aran and he's like 270 speed. That's just another point out, or another kind of conditional or pro or con to consider with some of the faster playstyles. But I'm sure you guys have seen this, and if you want to play her slower, I'm sure you may just need to take someone that has a slower build alongside them. Again, I could also see someone like Shepherd of the End being like an anti-cleave for this. If you end up, again, fighting against someone who's forced to use the Soulburn, Shepherd of the End, obviously also a pretty good like stranglehold. But I don't necessarily think, again, that you necessarily have to play the different builds that I have. I still think she's quite strong even as is. The barrier allows you to definitely get through a lot of the insane amounts of damage that you'd otherwise take. The heal is a nice semi-reset for the fight. And otherwise, I think debuffing is incredibly powerful, as I'm sure you guys have seen, and I'm sure you see things like Knockwall and the Witch of the Mere Tenebria all around, and especially Tactical Archetype Kali. In any case, though, guys, that's going to be it for today's video on Perfumer Byblis. I apologize for a bit of the ranting, but I feel like I've definitely put in a lot of, like, at this point, a lot of hours into trying Perfumer Byblis. So with that, if you guys enjoyed, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you all next time, though. Stay safe, stay healthy. Good night.